Claire Smith's scissors snipped through the last of Tommy's unruly hair, the soft brown locks falling to the porch boards, where they'd soon be swept away by the evening breeze. The fading sunlight caught in her auburn hair as she brushed the stray hairs from her son's narrow shoulders. "There," she said with forced cheerfulness. "Now you won't have to push it from your eyes while you're helping with the cattle." 3 months had passed since James had walked out their door, taking their savings, their best horse, and whatever remained of her dignity. Each day since had been a struggle to keep the ranch running, to feed her children, to maintain the illusion that everything would somehow be all right. "Mama, when's Papa coming back?" Tommy's small voice wavered as he turned to face her, innocent yet heavy with a longing that made Claire's chest tighten. She looked into her 8-year-old son's blue eyes, so like his father's, wide with hope she couldn't bear to extinguish. How many times had he asked this question? How many times had she given the same hollow answer? Beside them, 5-year-old Sarah sat on the steps, thumb tucked in her mouth, blonde curls framing her round face as she played with a wooden doll. Unlike her brother, Sarah had stopped asking about her father weeks ago, retreating instead into a silence that worried Claire more than Tommy's persistent questions. "I don't know, sweetheart," Claire answered softly, the lie bitter on her tongue. She knew James wasn't coming back. His parting words still echoed in her mind during the long, sleepless nights. "This life is too small for me, Claire. I wasn't meant to be tied down to a failing ranch with a woman who's lost her bloom and children who drain what little we have." The memory stung, but she forced a smile for her children. "Come on now, we've got chores to finish before supper. Tommy, check that the chickens are secure for the night. Sarah, help me gather the eggs." As the children scattered to their tasks, Claire leaned against the porch railing, allowing herself a moment of weariness. The ranch had never been prosperous, even when James was here. Now, with winter approaching and creditors circling like vultures, she feared they wouldn't last another season. Later that night, after tucking the children into bed with stories of better days ahead, Claire sat at her kitchen table, poring over the account book by lantern light. The figures swam before her eyes, a cascade of debts that seemed to multiply with each passing week. The bank payment was due in less than a month, and she was woefully short. Claire pushed a strand of chestnut hair from her face, tucking it behind her ear. She was 30 years old, but felt twice that age, worn down by the harshness of frontier life and the weight of being both mother and father to her children. The isolation of the ranch, once a source of pride for James, our own piece of heaven away from prying eyes, now felt like a prison. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, the town a half-day's ride. If trouble came, there would be no one to help. A sound outside startled her, a soft, deliberate crunch of boots on gravel. Claire's heart leapt to her throat. Raiders were not uncommon in these parts, and a woman alone with 2 small children made an easy target. She reached for James's old shotgun, kept loaded since his departure. With trembling hands, she approached the window, peering cautiously into the darkness. A silhouette stood at the edge of her property, tall, broad-shouldered, and unmistakably native. The moonlight revealed a man dressed in a mixture of traditional Apache clothing and cast-off settler garments. He stood perfectly still, as if aware of her watching. Claire's finger tensed on the trigger, her mind racing. The Apache tribes had been increasingly pushed from their lands, many forced onto reservations or into conflict with settlers. The newspapers were full of stories of raids and reprisals, bloodshed on both sides. But this man made no aggressive move. He simply waited, his presence a silent question. Claire considered her options. She could fire a warning shot, possibly scaring him off, but also alerting any companions he might have. She could pretend she hadn't seen him, barricade the doors, and pray he would leave by morning. Or she could face him directly, establish boundaries. Before she could decide, the figure melted into the shadows. Claire kept watch until her eyes burned with fatigue, but he did not reappear. She slept fitfully, rifle across her lap in the rocking chair, positioned to face both the front door and the children's room. Dreams of James's return mingled with nightmares of loss and violence, until she wasn't sure which would be worse. Morning came with a knock at her door. Claire, who had barely slept, started at the sound. Tommy raced to the window before she could stop him. "Mama, there's an Indian outside," he exclaimed, excitement rather than fear in his voice. "Stay back," Claire ordered, rising stiffly. She pushed Tommy behind her and gestured for Sarah to remain at the breakfast table. Gripping the rifle, she approached the door. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "I mean no harm," came the reply, in accented but clear English. "I seek work. Food in exchange." Claire hesitated, then cracked the door open just enough to see him. In daylight she could make out his features, strong jaw, obsidian eyes that held both wariness and dignity. A scar ran from his temple to his cheek, evidence of a hard life. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps in his early 30s, and his posture suggested military training of some kind. "What's your name?" she asked, not lowering the rifle. "Settlers call me John," he answered, then added with quiet pride, "My people call me Nantan." "Why come here?" Claire demanded, painfully aware of how vulnerable they were. "There are larger ranches to the south with more work." Nantan's gaze was direct, unblinking. "Those ranches would shoot Apache before speaking. You are alone. Need help." His assessment was accurate enough to make Claire uncomfortable. Had he been watching them for days? What else had he observed? "I have no money to pay a hand," she said bluntly. Nantan nodded once. "No money. Food and shelter only. I am skilled with horses, cattle. I fix things." He gestured toward her sagging fence, the broken wagon wheel propped against the barn, the loose boards on the porch steps, all evidence of the ranch's steady decline since James left. Claire studied him, weighing desperation against caution. The ranch was failing without help. The cattle scattered across the range, the crops neglected, repairs beyond her skills. With winter coming, she needed someone who could hunt, chop wood, maintain the structures that kept them safe from the elements. But harboring an Apache would invite scorn from the nearby town, perhaps worse. The territorial government had placed bounties on some tribes. If Nantan was wanted— "Why here?" she asked again, suspicion edging her voice. "What are you running from?" Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but a guarded respect for her directness. "My people move north. I follow later. Need safe place until then." His eyes met hers directly. "You need help. I see it." Behind her, Tommy pressed against her skirts, peering around at the stranger with undisguised curiosity. Sarah had crept to the door as well, her eyes wide as she studied Nantan. Claire thought of the cattle that needed tending, the repairs beyond her skills, the planting season fast approaching. Then she thought of the townspeople's reaction, the whispers that would follow if they discovered she had taken in an Apache man. "1 week," she said finally, lowering the rifle slightly. "You can stay in the barn. If there's trouble, you go immediately." Nantan nodded solemnly. "No trouble." He looked past her to the children, and something in his expression softened. "I will work hard." "Tommy, take Sarah back inside," Claire instructed. To Nantan, she added, "There are tools in the barn. The corral fence needs mending first. The cattle have been getting out." As Nantan turned to go, Claire called after him, "I keep this rifle loaded, remember that." He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "You protect your children. I respect this." Then, almost too quietly to hear, he added, "I would do the same." As Claire stepped back into the house, closing the door firmly behind her, she couldn't know how profoundly this decision would change their lives. In the Arizona Territory of 1870, with tensions between settlers and natives at a breaking point, she had just invited an Apache warrior into her home. Whether from desperation or providence, she had set in motion events that would either save or destroy everything she had left. Tommy tugged at her apron. "Is he going to live with us now, Mama?" Claire watched through the window as Nantan examined the corral fence, his movements methodical and precise. "Just for a week," she said, "just until he can move on." Sarah, who had been silent for so long, suddenly spoke. "He has sad eyes," she observed, "like yours when you think we're sleeping." Claire knelt before her daughter, struck by the child's perception. "Sometimes people carry sadness with them," she explained gently. "It doesn't mean they're bad people." "Is that why Papa left?" Tommy asked. "Because he was sad?" Claire struggled to find words that wouldn't taint their memory of their father. "Your Papa. He wanted different things than what we have here. He thought he might find them somewhere else." "Will he find them and come back?" Tommy persisted. Claire pulled both children into her arms, breathing in their scent, soap and innocence and possibility. "I don't know," she whispered. "But we have each other." And for now we have help to keep our home safe." Outside, Nantan had already begun removing the broken rails from the corral fence. His efficiency was evident even from a distance. Claire watched him work, uncertainty mingling with a fragile hope. 1 week, she had said. 7 days to see if this unusual arrangement could work. 7 days to decide if the risk was worth taking. She had no way of knowing that those 7 days would stretch into weeks, then months, changing the course of all their lives. That the stranger in her barn would become essential to their survival. That enemies, both old and new, would threaten the delicate peace they would build. Or that one day, in a moment of crisis, this man would whisper words that would pierce her carefully guarded heart. "Let me stay, for your children deserve a father." The week Claire had promised Nantan stretched into 2, then 3 as autumn's golden touch transformed the Arizona landscape. With each passing day, the presence of the Apache warrior became less foreign, less threatening, and increasingly essential to their survival. By the end of the first month, Claire had to admit, if only to herself, that Nantan had more than earned his place on the ranch. The man worked from dawn until dusk without complaint, tackling tasks that had overwhelmed her for months. The broken fence was mended, the leaking roof repaired, the scattered cattle rounded up and properly penned. Even the old wagon that had sat useless behind the barn now had a new wheel, fashioned with remarkable skill from seasoned oak. One crisp morning, Claire stood at the kitchen window, coffee cup warming her hands, as she watched Nantan split firewood. His movements were precise and economical, each swing of the axe bringing it down exactly where intended. A pile of neatly stacked wood grew steadily beside him, enough to last through the coming winter nights, a luxury she hadn't dared hope for after James left. "He's still here," Tommy observed, appearing at her side with a slice of bread half-eaten in his hand. "Does that mean he's staying forever?" Claire smoothed her son's hair, recently trimmed again by her own scissors. "Nothing is forever, Tommy," she said gently, "but Mr. Nantan has been a great help to us." "I like him," Tommy declared with a child's simple certainty. "He doesn't yell like Papa did, and he knows everything about animals. Yesterday he showed me how to tell which way a deer went, just by looking at broken twigs." Claire felt a pang at the comparison. James had indeed been quick to anger, especially in those final months, his frustration with the ranch's failures often directed at his family. The children had grown skilled at making themselves scarce when his mood darkened. Nantan, by contrast, moved through their lives with a calm presence that had gradually eased the constant tension they'd lived with for so long. His interactions with the children were particularly surprising. Though a man of few words, he had shown unexpected patience with Tommy's endless questions and Sarah's shy curiosity. "Mama, look what Nantan made me." Sarah's soft voice drew Claire's attention. The little girl entered the kitchen, clutching a small wooden figure in her small hands. Claire knelt to examine the carving, a delicate little horse, details etched with remarkable skill. The mane and tail flowed as if caught in motion, the legs positioned in mid-gallop. It must have taken hours of careful work. "It's beautiful," she said truthfully, surprised by a pang of gratitude that tightened her throat. "Did you thank him?" Sarah nodded, her thumb briefly leaving her mouth. "He said it's a special pony that brings good dreams." Claire smiled, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Sarah's nightmares had been frequent since James left, often leaving the child tearful and exhausted by morning. Through the window, Claire saw Nantan pause in his work, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool air. His gaze swept the property with the alertness she had come to recognize, always watching, always aware. When his eyes met hers through the window, she nodded in acknowledgement, a silent thank you for the gift to her daughter. He returned the nod, his expression unchanging, yet somehow Claire sensed his understanding. That evening, as had become their routine, Nantan ate dinner with them but remained largely silent, his eyes watchful and alert. Claire had noticed how he positioned himself with his back to the wall, facing the door, always prepared for danger. She wondered what experiences had taught him such caution, what hardships had carved the scar that marked his face. The stew she had prepared was hearty with vegetables from their garden, and rabbit Nantan had caught. Before James left, meat had been scarce on their table, his hunting more often an excuse to drink with friends in town than a means to feed his family. Now, with Nantan bringing fresh game several times a week, the children's hollow cheeks had begun to fill out. "The fence is completely fixed," Nantan stated after finishing his stew. Tomorrow I start on the roof before winter storms come. Claire nodded, refilling his cup with coffee. Thank you. After a moment's hesitation, she added, Your agreement was for 1 week. It's been nearly a month now. Something flickered in Nantan's dark eyes. Concern, perhaps disappointment. He set down his spoon carefully. You want me to go? Tommy's head snapped up, alarm clear on his face. Sarah froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth, eyes wide. Claire looked at her children, both watching the exchange with worried expressions. Since Nantan's arrival, Tommy had stopped having nightmares about his father leaving. Sarah had begun talking more, the wooden horse now her constant companion. The ranch was functioning again. The creditors had been temporarily appeased with a small payment from the sale of cattle Nantan had helped recover from the far reaches of the property. No, she admitted, meeting his gaze directly. You can stay longer if you wish. The work is helpful. The corner of Nantan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. I stay. The simple declaration was met with visible relief from the children. Tommy immediately launched into excited chatter about helping with the roof repairs, while Sarah quietly pushed her carved horse across the tabletop, making it prance toward Nantan's plate. That night, as Claire prepared for bed, she heard voices from the children's room. Quietly, she approached the partially open door, curious about the soft murmur that wasn't Tommy's usual chatter. Nantan sat on the floor between their beds, speaking softly in his native tongue. Though she couldn't understand the words, the cadence suggested a story. Both children listened, entranced, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the oil lamp. Claire leaned against the wall, an unexpected tightness in her throat. James had never spent evenings with the children this way. He'd considered bedtime stories a woman's duty, the children themselves bothersome interruptions to his plans and ambitions. As Nantan's voice continued, weaving what sounded like an ancient tale, Claire found herself equally captivated. There was a richness to his native language, a poetry in the rise and fall of the unfamiliar words. When he finished, Tommy asked a question, and to Claire's surprise, Nantan answered patiently, teaching the boy a few simple words in Apache. Not wanting to intrude on the moment, Claire slipped away, her mind troubled by confusing emotions. There was gratitude, certainly, for the stability Nantan had brought to their lives. But beneath it ran a current of something more complex, an awareness of him not just as a hired hand, but as a man with his own history, his own culture, his own quiet dignity. A man who had somehow begun to fill the emptiness James had left behind. As days turned to weeks and weeks to months, Nantan's presence became a fixture of their lives. The barn had been converted into modest but comfortable quarters for him, furnished with items Claire had found in the attic, an old but sturdy bed frame, a chest of drawers her father had made, a small table and chair. Nantan had accepted these offerings with solemn gratitude, adding his own touches with woven mats and carved items that transformed the space into something both practical and personal. The ranch began to take on a renewed vitality. Fences mended, fields tended, livestock healthy. For the first time since James left, Claire dared to think they might survive the winter, perhaps even prosper in the spring. But as their situation improved, Claire became increasingly aware of the precariousness of their arrangement. The few necessary trips to town for supplies had made it clear that rumors were circulating. Shopkeepers who had once been friendly now regarded her with cool suspicion. Women who had once shared gossip over dry goods now fell silent when she approached. Claire ignored the whispers, focusing instead on acquiring what they needed and returning to the ranch as quickly as possible. She told herself it didn't matter what people thought. Surviving was what mattered. Keeping the children safe and fed was what mattered. Yet she knew the isolation couldn't last forever. The outside world, with its rigid boundaries and prejudices, would eventually intrude. That reality arrived on a bright October afternoon while Claire hung laundry in the yard. The children were helping Nantan with the horses, their laughter carrying across the property as they learned to brush down the animals properly. The sound of approaching hoofbeats broke the peaceful rhythm of the day. Claire's heart sank as she recognized Marshall Davis from town, accompanied by William Harding, the banker who held the note on her property. Mrs. Smith, Davis called, dismounting with a tip of his hat that did nothing to disguise the disapproval in his eyes. I've received some concerning reports. Claire wiped her hands on her apron, straightening her spine. She could see Nantan in the distance, ushering the children into the barn, away from potential trouble. His instincts for danger were unerring. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. What brings you out this way?" she asked, her voice deliberately light. Harding cleared his throat, his round face flushed from the ride. "Several townspeople have mentioned you're harboring an Apache on your property." "I've hired help," Claire replied evenly. "Something my husband neglected to do before abandoning his family." The banker's eyebrows rose at her directness. "Mrs. Smith, you understand that your situation is already somewhat irregular. A woman attempting to run a ranch alone raises questions about financial stability." "Which is precisely why I've secured assistance," Claire countered. "The cattle are healthy, the property is being maintained, and your payment was made on time last month." "Mrs. Smith," Marshal Davis said, lowering his voice and stepping closer, "surely you understand the impropriety. A white woman alone with a savage—" "Mr. Nantan has been nothing but respectful and hard-working," Claire interrupted, anger flaring at the slur. "Which is more than I can say for many civilized men of my acquaintance." Harding's face reddened. "Now see here, Mrs. Smith, your loan payment is already overdue. As your creditor, I have concerns about your judgment." "My judgment is to keep this ranch running for my children," Claire said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "If that offends the town's sensibilities, so be it." Just then, Nantan emerged from the barn, leading Claire's old mare. He had clearly ensured the children remained inside, away from the confrontation. He assessed the situation instantly, his body tensing like a drawn bow, though his face remained impassive. "Everything all right, Mrs. Smith?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with caution. Before Claire could answer, Davis's hand moved to his pistol. "You stay back, Indian." "Stop it!" Claire snapped, stepping between them. "This is my property, and Mr. Nantan works for me. I'll thank you both to leave if you've said your piece." The men exchanged glances, a silent communication that made Claire's stomach tighten with apprehension. Finally, Harding spoke. "Very well, Mrs. Smith, but consider yourself warned. This arrangement will not be looked upon kindly by the town. Your payment is due in full by the end of the month." They mounted their horses, Harding already turning away, but Davis lingered a moment longer. "I've known your family a long time, Claire," he said, his tone softer. "Your father was a respected man. He wouldn't want to see you living like this." Claire felt the sting of his words, but held her ground. "My father taught me to value character over appearance, Marshal. Perhaps you've forgotten that lesson." After they departed, kicking up dust as they galloped back toward town, Claire's confident facade crumbled. She sank onto the porch steps, hands shaking. Nantan approached cautiously. "They threaten you because of me." "They threaten me because I'm a woman trying to survive without a man's permission," Claire corrected bitterly. "You're just their excuse." Nantan sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance. For a long moment neither spoke, sharing the weight of understanding that passed between them. "I should leave," he finally said, the words heavy with resignation. "Bring more trouble if I stay." Claire turned to study his profile, the straight nose, the proud set of his jaw, the scar that told of survival against odds. In the months he'd been there, she'd never asked about his past, and he'd never volunteered it. Yet somehow she felt she knew him better than she'd known James after years of marriage. "No," she said firmly, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. "You shouldn't have to leave. None of us should have to leave. This is our home." Something shifted in Nantan's expression, surprise followed by something deeper she couldn't name. For the first time, he held her gaze without reservation. "Our home," he repeated softly, testing the words. The phrase hung between them, filled with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Claire looked away first, suddenly aware of the impropriety the men from town had accused her of, yet she couldn't bring herself to regret her words. That night, after the children were asleep, Claire found Nantan sitting outside carving another wooden figure by moonlight. Without speaking, she settled beside him on the porch step, wrapping her shawl tighter against the autumn chill. "My husband said this land was worthless," she said after a while, watching his hands work the wood with practiced precision. "Too dry, too remote, too difficult." Nantan's hands paused in their work. "This land is alive," he said, gesturing to the shadows of mesas in the distance, the scattered juniper trees, the vast sky overhead. "It gives to those who respect it. Your husband did not see. And you do? She asked, genuinely curious. He nodded once. My people lived in harmony with this land for generations, before borders, before ownership. Yet they're forcing your people onto reservations, Claire said quietly. The newspapers from town were filled with stories of the government's efforts to contain the Apache tribes, of the resistance that met those efforts, of the bloodshed on both sides. Pain flashed across Nantan's features, quickly masked but unmistakable. My band resists. They move north to join others who still fight. I was to follow after healing from this. He touched the scar on his face, a soldier's knife. Claire's breath caught. The intimacy of this confession hung between them like a tangible thing, the first real piece of his past he had shared. I'm sorry, she said, meaning it. Nantan shook his head slightly. You have lost also. Your husband. Your security. Not the same, Claire murmured. Loss is loss, he replied simply. They sat in silence for a while, the night sounds of the desert creating a peaceful backdrop to their shared solitude. Why did you stay here longer than planned? She asked finally, though part of her already knew the answer. Nantan's gaze moved to the house where Tommy and Sarah slept. Children need protection, he said simply. Then, almost imperceptibly, he added, and you also. The air between them changed, charged with unspoken possibilities. Claire felt something stir within her that she'd thought had died along with her dreams of a loving marriage, a flutter of awareness, of connection. We should rest, she said, rising abruptly. Tomorrow will be another long day. As she turned to go, Nantan's voice stopped her. Claire. It was the first time he had spoken her name. The sound of it in his accented voice sent an unexpected warmth through her. She looked back at him, silhouetted against the vast Arizona night. This land knows no boundaries, he said. Perhaps people can learn the same. Claire nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. As she walked back to the house, she realized that something fundamental had shifted. The ranch no longer felt like a burden she carried alone, but a shared endeavor, perhaps even the beginning of something she dared not yet name. Behind her, Nantan continued his carving, his strong hands shaping the wood as surely as his presence had begun to reshape their lives. The night stretched around them, full of stars and silence and possibilities that would have seemed impossible just months before. Two worlds had collided on this remote patch of Arizona territory, a white woman abandoned by her husband, an Apache warrior separated from his tribe. Convention said they should remain strangers, enemies even. But necessity had forged a different path, one that was leading them toward an uncertain future, a future where perhaps the boundaries that divided them might begin to blur. The autumn moon cast long shadows across the Smith Ranch as Claire and Nantan parted ways that night. His words, "This land knows no boundaries," echoed in her mind as she closed the cabin door. She hadn't yet named the feeling growing between them, but like the land itself, it refused to be confined by the artificial borders others had established. As summer surrendered to autumn, the ranch flourished. 3 months had passed since Nantan's arrival, and the transformation was remarkable. The cattle grew healthy on recovered pasture land, the harvest had been abundant, and the buildings stood strong against the coming winter. But the most profound changes were in the people themselves. Tommy no longer asked when his father would return. Instead, he followed Nantan everywhere, absorbing knowledge of tracking, weather patterns, and the rhythm of the land. Sarah, once withdrawn and silent, now sang as she played, her collection of carved wooden animals growing with each kind deed or brave act Nantan noticed in her, and Claire had rediscovered her own strength, standing taller and speaking with a confidence she'd thought lost forever. The payment to the bank had been made barely, through the sale of cattle Nantan had helped recover. But Claire knew their troubles weren't over. Each trip to town revealed growing hostility, cold stares, whispered comments, and the unmistakable tension of a community preparing to act on its prejudice. One crisp morning, Claire found Nantan kneeling by the creek that bordered her property, studying tracks in the mud. "Riders," he said without looking up. 5 men. Last night. A chill ran through Claire. "On our land, why?" Nantan stood, his face grave. "They circled the property, watching." "The town has been talking," Claire said, wrapping her shawl tighter. "William Harding makes no secret of wanting this land, And with an Apache here, I bring danger to you, Nantan said, his voice tight with regret. No, Claire countered firmly. We were in danger before you came. Without you, we might have lost everything already. We should be prepared, he said after studying her face. Keep the children close to the house. The days that followed carried a new tension. Claire kept the children nearby, explaining it as caution against early winter storms. Nantan checked the property's defenses each evening and showed Claire again how to use James's old rifle. If trouble comes, he told her quietly one night, take the children to the root cellar. There is food, water, and a small opening at the back that leads out behind the woodpile. For a week the anticipated threat didn't materialize. Claire began to hope that perhaps the town's animosity would remain just whispers rather than action. That hope shattered on a bright October afternoon. Tommy was helping Nantan repair a saddle, while Sarah sorted beans at the kitchen table. Claire hung laundry, taking advantage of the sunshine before winter's arrival. The distant rumble of hoofbeats broke their peaceful routine. Claire exchanged a glance with Nantan before hurrying to the children. Tommy, Sarah, inside now, to the root cellar, just like we practiced. After ensuring the children were hidden, Claire returned to find Nantan on the porch, rifle in hand. She took her place beside him, shotgun ready. 7 riders approached, dust billowing behind them. Claire recognized Marshal Davis, William Harding, and several of James's former drinking companions, all heavily armed. Mrs. Smith, Davis called as they drew near. Step away from the Indian. This is my property, Marshal, Claire replied firmly. State your business. We've come to rid you of your problem, Harding said with a smug smile. Reports of stolen cattle have been coming in from ranches north of here. Apache raiding parties. Nantan has been here the entire time, Claire said coldly. Maybe he's signaling to his savage friends, one man sneered. That's absurd, Claire snapped. Now leave, you're trespassing. Mrs. Smith, Davis said condescendingly, you're a woman alone, clearly influenced by this man. For your own protection, we're removing him. I am not alone, Claire declared, and you have no right to remove anyone from my property. James always said you were stubborn as a mule, another man commented. James abandoned his family, Claire retorted. He has no say here anymore. Actually, Harding interjected, he does. I received a letter from Mr. Smith last week. He's in California and plans to sell this property to cover his debts. As his wife, you have no legal standing to prevent it. The news struck Claire like a physical blow. You're lying. I have the letter at the bank, properly witnessed and notarized. Harding's smile widened. This land will be mine within the month. In the meantime, we'll take the Indian off your hands. 3 men dismounted, hands on their pistols. No, Claire said, raising her shotgun. You will not touch him. Claire, Nantan murmured, do not risk yourself. Listen to him, Mrs. Smith, Davis warned. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Before Claire could decide what to do, the root cellar door creaked open. Tommy ran toward them, Sarah following. Leave them alone, Tommy shouted, positioning himself in front of Nantan. He's our friend. Tommy, no, Claire cried. The distraction was momentary, but enough. One man lunged for Claire's shotgun. In the struggle, the weapon discharged, shattering the tension. Chaos erupted. Claire was thrown to the ground, the breath knocked from her lungs. Through a haze of pain, she saw Nantan fighting with deadly precision, but there were too many opponents. Sarah's cry cut through the chaos. Claire scrambled to her feet, finding her daughter frozen in terror near the cellar door. Tommy was being restrained by one of the men, struggling fiercely. Stop, Davis shouted. Enough. When Claire's vision cleared, she found herself on her knees, Sarah clinging to her, trembling. Tommy was being held roughly by a man with a split lip, evidence of the boy's resistance, and Nantan was on his knees, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, arms wrenched behind his back. Davis stood over him, pistol pressed to his temple. This ends now, Davis declared. We're taking him in for the cattle raids. He'll stand trial. There won't be any trial, Claire said, her voice shaking. You'll lynch him before you reach town. Harding straightened his vest. That's not your concern, Mrs. Smith. Your concern should be finding new lodgings. You have until the end of the month. As they bound Nantan's hands, Claire caught his gaze. The depth of emotion in his eyes stole her breath. Regret, apology, and something that looked remarkably like love. The children, he said quietly in Apache, words he had taught her. Protect them. Then they took him away, leaving Claire with her sobbing children and a future suddenly empty of hope. The next 3 days passed in a fog of despair. Claire made inquiries in town, only to meet hostile stares. Nantan was being held in the jail, awaiting a circuit judge who everyone knew would never give an Apache a fair hearing. On the 4th night, as Claire sat at the kitchen table planning their uncertain future, a soft knock came at the back door. Heart racing, she opened it to find Mary Wilson, the midwife who had delivered both her children. "I can't stay," Mary whispered, glancing nervously around. "But you should know. They're planning to move him tomorrow at dawn. Taking him to Prescott for trial, they say," but she didn't need to finish the thought. "Thank you," Claire said, clasping the older woman's hands. After Mary left, Claire knew what she had to do. She woke the children and dressed them warmly. "We're going on an adventure," she explained, "but you must be very quiet and do exactly as I say." By midnight, they were in town, their wagon hidden behind the abandoned livery stable. Tommy's eyes showed understanding beyond his years as Claire explained their plan. "It's dangerous," she admitted, "but Nantan would do the same for us." "Because he loves us," Tommy said with certainty. The jail was poorly guarded, with only a single deputy dozing in a chair. Using skills Nantan had taught her, Claire moved silently with the children to the back window. As she worked on the corroded hinges, she whispered Nantan's name. His face appeared, bruised but alive. The relief that flooded Claire was overwhelming. "What are you doing?" he demanded in a harsh whisper. "The children are safer with you than without you," Claire finished. "We all are." With Tommy's help, she loosened the window frame enough for Nantan to squeeze through, dropping silently to the ground. He gathered Sarah into his arms, and Claire led them back to the wagon. As they cleared the town limits, heading north toward the territories where Nantan's people had gone, Claire finally allowed herself to breathe. "We're leaving everything behind," she said, the reality setting in. Nantan's hand found hers in the darkness. "Not everything," he said softly. Under the vast Arizona stars, Claire felt the weight of the past falling away. James, the ranch, the town, none of it mattered next to the family beside her. A family forged not by law or convention, but by choice and love. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of hope, Nantan spoke the words that would mark the beginning of their new life. "Let me stay," he whispered, "for your children deserve a father. And you, Claire Smith, deserve a man who sees your strength and beauty as clearly as the North Star." In answer, Claire leaned across the wagon seat and pressed her lips to his. A promise, a beginning, a defiance of everything that had tried to keep them apart. The kiss that sealed Claire and Nantan's unspoken promise lingered between them as their wagon continued northward through the rugged Arizona landscape. That single moment of connection had transformed their desperate flight into something more profound, a deliberate journey toward a shared future neither could have imagined months before. For 2 weeks, they traveled steadily northward, following hidden trails Nantan remembered from his people's migrations. By day, they moved cautiously, avoiding established roads and settlements where word of an Apache escaping custody might have spread. By night, they made camp in sheltered hollows and secluded canyons, Nantan teaching Tommy and Claire to erase all traces of their presence before moving on. The children adapted to their new circumstances with surprising resilience. Tommy thrived on the adventure, eagerly absorbing Nantan's lessons on survival in the wilderness, how to find water in seemingly barren landscapes, how to identify edible plants, how to move silently through brush. Each new skill added to the boy's growing confidence, his pride evident in the straightening of his small shoulders whenever Nantan offered quiet praise. Sarah, though initially frightened by their abrupt departure, found comfort in the consistency of their evening routines. Each night after making camp, she would arrange her wooden animals in a protective circle around her bedroll, while Nantan told stories of his people under star-filled skies. The familiar cadence of his voice in both English and Apache became her lullaby, soothing her into peaceful sleep despite their uncertain circumstances. For Claire, the journey was both liberation and reckoning. She had left behind everything familiar, her father's ranch, the community she'd known since childhood, even her identity as James Smith's abandoned wife. Yet, with each mile that separated them from the town's prejudice and Harding's threats, she felt a weight lifting. The woman who had once measured her words carefully for fear of provoking her husband's temper now spoke her mind freely. The mother who had once worried about social standing now concerned herself only with her children's safety and happiness. And then there was Nantan, steady, vigilant, yet increasingly open as the distance from pursuit grew. The reserve that had marked his early days at the ranch gradually gave way to moments of unexpected tenderness, his hand finding hers as they sat by the campfire after the children slept, the gentle brush of his fingers against her cheek when helping her down from the wagon, the quiet pride in his eyes when she mastered a survival skill he'd taught her. One evening, as they made camp in a sheltered valley, Claire found Nantan standing on a small rise, watching the sunset paint the western sky in vivid golds and crimsons. She joined him, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders against the growing autumn chill. "It's beautiful," she said softly, following his gaze to the horizon where distant mountains stood silhouetted against the fading light. Nantan nodded, his profile strong and dignified in the golden glow. "My people believe the sky holds stories. Each color speaks of what has passed and what is to come." "And what does this sky tell you?" Claire asked, genuinely curious. Over the months, she had come to respect the deep wisdom in Nantan's understanding of the natural world. He was silent for a moment, considering. "Change," he said finally. "The ending of one season, the beginning of another." His gaze shifted from the horizon to her face. "Like us." The simple statement hung between them, profound in its acknowledgement of their transformation. They were no longer employer and employee, no longer settler and native, no longer even friends. They had become something language struggled to define, partners in a journey that transcended the physical miles they traveled. "Are you certain this is the path you wish to follow?" Nantan asked, his voice low and serious. "There is still time to find another way, perhaps a larger town where you and the children could start again without you," Claire finished when he hesitated. She shook her head firmly. "No, we've chosen our path together. The children need you." She paused, gathering courage before adding softly, "I need you." Something in Nantan's expression shifted, a subtle relaxing of lines around his eyes, a softening of his mouth. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then we continue north," he said. "My people will welcome you if we can find them." "And if we can't?" Claire asked, voicing the fear that occasionally surfaced during their journey. "Then we find our own way," Nantan replied with quiet certainty. "Together." The word echoed in Claire's mind as they returned to camp, where Tommy was proudly tending the small fire, and Sarah was arranging stones in careful patterns around its edge. Together. It was a concept that had eluded her even during her marriage to James, who had always maintained separate lives and interests despite sharing a home and children. With Nantan, together meant something different, a partnership of equals, each bringing different strengths, each respecting the other's contributions. It meant 4 people becoming a family, not through law or blood, but through choice and love. Spring came early to the Northern Territories, a gentle awakening after the harsh winter months they had weathered in a makeshift shelter high in the mountains. Their journey had been interrupted by early snowfall, forcing them to establish a temporary home in a cave Nantan had discovered, dry, defensible, and large enough to house them comfortably until the passes cleared. Those winter months, though challenging, had cemented the bonds between them. Confined together in the shelter, they had established routines and traditions that merged Nantan's Apache heritage with Claire's settler upbringing. He taught the children his language, showing them how to craft simple tools and toys from materials at hand. She passed on her knowledge of medicinal herbs, storytelling, and the arithmetic and letters she had learned in her own childhood. And in the quiet evenings after the children slept, Claire and Nantan had grown closer, their conversations deeper, their silences more comfortable. The kiss that had marked their departure from the town had been followed by others, tentative at first, then increasingly confident, as they acknowledged the feelings that had been building between them since those first days on the ranch. Now, as the snow retreated and new green touched the landscape, Claire stood outside the small cabin they had built with the help of Nantan's people. They had found his band 2 months earlier, following rumors and signs that led them to this hidden valley. protected by mountains on 3 sides and accessible only through passages known to the tribe. Here they had been welcomed, cautiously at first, then with increasing warmth as the Apache people recognized Nantan's happiness and Claire's genuine respect for their ways. She watched as the first green shoots pushed through the thawing earth, symbolic of their new beginning. In the meadow beyond, Tommy raced with the other children, his laughter carrying on the breeze. After initial shyness, he had been accepted into the band's group of young boys, his fair hair making him distinctive but not unwelcome. Nearby, Sarah sat with an elderly Apache woman called White Dove, learning to weave a basket, her small fingers nimble and determined. 6 months had passed since their flight from Arizona. 6 months of challenge, adaptation, and unexpected joy. The Apache band that had welcomed them was small, one of the few groups still living freely outside the reservation system. Their territory lay in this hidden valley where they maintained their traditional ways while adapting to the changing world around them. Some of the younger men occasionally ventured to distant trading posts, bringing back news, tools, and other necessities that could not be crafted from the land. At first, Claire had feared rejection, a white woman among people who had every reason to distrust those of her race. But Nantan, standing in the tribe as the son of a respected elder, had smoothed their acceptance, and over time Claire had earned her own place through her willingness to learn, to work, and to respect the customs of her new community. She sensed Nantan's approach before she heard him, a subtle shift in the air that her body recognized instinctively after months of growing intimacy. "The hunting party returns," he said, coming to stand beside her. "With deer and turkey." Claire turned to face him, taking in the sight that still quickened her pulse. The proud set of his shoulders, the quiet strength in his eyes, the smile that now came more readily than when they'd first met. The harsh winter had left its mark on both of them. New lines around their eyes, a few strands of silver in her chestnut hair, but these were badges of survival, not defeat. "There will be a celebration tonight," she noted, returning his smile. Nantan nodded, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering on her cheek. Such gestures of affection, once rare, had become a cherished part of their daily life. "The council wishes to speak with us," he said, "before the feast." Claire's smile faltered. Though they had been accepted, their position remained precarious. Government scouts had been spotted nearby, and tensions were high. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Nantan shook his head. "No, but there are decisions to be made about the future." That evening, as twilight painted the valley in violet shadows, Claire and Nantan sat in the council lodge with the tribal elders. Tommy and Sarah had been entrusted to the care of White Dove, who had taken a special interest in the children, teaching them the language and traditions of their new community. Ahiga, the eldest of the council and Nantan's uncle, spoke first. "The white man's government pushes closer each season. Our people dwindle while theirs multiply." Murmurs of agreement circled the lodge. "Some bands have gone to the reservations," another elder, Enepai, added. "They say there is no future in resistance." Claire listened carefully, her hand finding Nantan's in the dimness. "And what do you say?" Nantan asked, his voice respectful but firm. Ahiga's weathered face creased in a smile. "I say that survival takes many forms. Our ways must continue even if our paths change." He gestured to Claire. "You have brought us new knowledge of the white settlers' medicines, their language, their thinking. Your children bridge 2 worlds. This is valuable." Claire bowed her head, honored and humbled. "We have received word," Enepe continued, "of a place to the north, a valley where several tribes have gathered, Apache, Navajo, some Shoshone. They live apart from the white man's world, but trade with friendly settlers. They have found a way to keep the old ways while learning the new." Ahiga nodded solemnly. "Our band will journey there when the moon is full again. It is a hard path, but the future of our people lies in finding safe harbor." Claire felt a flutter of anxiety. Would they be welcome in this new place? Would this mean another dangerous journey with the children? As if reading her thoughts, Nantan squeezed her hand. "And what of my family?" he asked. The use of the word family, so simple yet so profound, warmed Claire's heart. In the eyes of Nantan's people, in the only way that truly mattered, they were indeed a family. Ahiga's gaze moved between them. "That is why we speak with you now. You must decide your path. There is a small settlement near this northern valley, Enape explained. White settlers who trade fairly with the tribes. Some are people who reject the ways of their own kind, Quakers they call themselves. They might welcome a woman who knows both worlds. Claire absorbed this information, possibilities unfolding in her mind, a place where they might live in peace, where the children could learn both heritages, where she and Nantan might build something lasting. We will think on this, Nantan replied, and give our answer before the journey begins. Later, as the celebration fires burned low and the children slept soundly in their small alcove of the cabin, Claire and Nantan sat by their own hearth, the future hanging between them like a question. "What are you thinking?" Nantan asked, stoking the embers. Claire gazed into the flames. "I'm thinking about journeys," she said softly, "about how far we've come from that ranch in Arizona." Nantan nodded, his profile strong in the firelight. "Do you regret it, leaving your world behind?" Claire considered this. There were things she missed, the comfort of familiar customs, the convenience of town life, the certainty of her place in the social order. But against these losses she weighed what she had gained. "No," she said firmly. "My world was crumbling before you arrived. James had taken the heart of it when he left. You—" She paused, searching for words. "You helped me build something new, something better." Nantan moved to sit beside her, his shoulder pressed against hers in comfortable intimacy. "And now we must build again," he said, "in this new place." "Is that what you want?" Claire asked. "To go north with your people?" Nantan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "My people's way has always been to move with the seasons, to follow the path of survival. But now—" He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Now my heart is rooted where you and the children are." The simple truth of his words brought tears to Claire's eyes. "And my heart has found its home with you," she whispered. Nantan reached into a small pouch at his waist and withdrew something that gleamed in the firelight, a ring fashioned from silver, decorated with delicate turquoise inlays. "In your tradition," he said, "a man gives a ring to the woman he wishes to make his wife." Claire's breath caught. "Nantan, in my tradition," he continued, "a warrior proves his worth through his actions, his provision, his protection." His dark eyes held hers, earnest and vulnerable. "I have tried to be worthy of you, Claire, of Tommy and Sarah." "You are," she assured him, her voice thick with emotion. "More than worthy." Nantan held up the ring. "Then I ask, by both our traditions, be my wife. Let us make our path together, wherever it leads." Claire extended her trembling hand, watching as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had always been meant to rest there. "Yes," she said, the word both an ending and a beginning. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with the passion that had grown between them over months of shared struggles and quiet moments. When they finally parted, Claire rested her forehead against his, savoring the certainty that had replaced doubt. "What will we tell the council?" she asked. Nantan smiled, the expression transforming his solemn features. "That we will journey north with the tribe, that we will help build bridges between their world and the settlement, that our children will learn both ways and be stronger for it." Claire nodded, the future suddenly clear and bright with possibility. "Our children," she repeated softly. The words hung in the air, and Nantan's eyes widened slightly in understanding. "Claire, are you saying—" She took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "I suspected for a few weeks. White Dove confirmed it yesterday. By winter there will be another child in our family, one born of both our bloodlines." Joy spread across Nantan's face, pure and unrestrained. He gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "A new life," he murmured against her hair. "A new beginning." 2 weeks later, as dawn broke over the valley, the tribe prepared for their journey north. Wagons were loaded, horses saddled, children bundled in warm blankets against the morning chill. Claire stood with Tommy and Sarah beside the small cart Nantan had traded for, their few possessions packed neatly, ready for the long journey ahead. The children were excited, viewing the expedition as an adventure rather than a necessity. Nantan approached, leading their horses. He had changed since that first day at her ranch, no longer the wary, solitary warrior, but a man who had found his place in a family of his choosing. "Are you ready?" he asked, helping Sarah onto her pony. Claire looked at her children, at the man who had become her husband in all the ways that mattered, at the horizon stretching before them, unknown but full of promise. "Yes," she said, taking his offered hand. "We're ready." As they joined the procession moving out of the valley, Nantan rode close beside her. "In my language," he said quietly, "there is a saying, 'The path is made by walking it.'" Claire smiled, understanding the wisdom in these words. Their path had not been easy or conventional. It had been forged through hardship, prejudice, and loss, but it had also been illuminated by courage, compassion, and love. "Then let's walk it together," she replied, her voice strong with conviction. Ahead of them, Tommy urged his pony forward, eager to scout the trail as Nantan had taught him. Sarah chattered excitedly with another child riding nearby, and within Claire, the new life grew, a promise of futures yet unwritten. The morning sun crested the mountains, bathing the procession in golden light. Claire lifted her face to its warmth, remembering another dawn many months ago, the day she had first allowed Nantan into her home and unknowingly into her heart. "Let me stay," he had whispered on that desperate night of escape. Now, as they rode side by side toward a new horizon, those words had transformed into a different promise. "I will always stay." Claire reached across the space between their horses and took Nantan's hand. His fingers intertwined with hers, strong and sure. In his eyes, she saw not just the man she loved, but the future they would build together. A future where boundaries of race and prejudice held no power over the family they had forged. As the tribe crested the ridge that would take them away from the valley, Nantan paused, looking back at the place that had sheltered them through the winter. "My father taught me that a warrior finds strength in knowing where he comes from," he said, "but also in knowing where he is going." Claire followed his gaze, then turned to look ahead at the path stretching before them, a path they would walk together, as husband and wife, as parents, as partners in whatever challenges awaited. "And where are we going?" she asked, though the question was more philosophical than literal. Nantan's smile deepened, reaching his eyes with a warmth that still made her heart race. "Home," he said simply. "Wherever we are together, that is home." As they rode on, Claire reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a desperate widow on a failing ranch to a woman who had found the courage to redefine her life on her own terms. From an Apache warrior seeking temporary shelter to a man who had discovered his true purpose in the love of a family. Their story was not one that the world around them would easily understand or accept, but it was theirs, hard-won, authentic, and enduring. The children rode ahead, silhouetted against the vast sky, their laughter carrying back on the wind. Nantan reached over to rest his hand briefly on Claire's stomach, a tender acknowledgement of the new life growing within. "For your children deserve a father," he had said on that pivotal night. Now, as they journeyed toward their shared future, Claire knew that her children had found not just a father, but a hero. And she had found not just a partner, but a love that transcended every boundary society had tried to place between them. As the tribe moved northward, their figures gradually blending with the landscape, the story of Claire and Nantan continued, a testament to the power of love to forge new paths where none had existed before, to build bridges across worlds, and to create family bonds stronger than blood or convention. In the years to come, the settlement in the northern valley would tell their tale, of the white woman who had chosen love over convention, of the Apache warrior who had found his greatest strength in gentleness, and of the family they had created between two worlds. And in that telling, perhaps others would find the courage to follow their own hearts beyond the boundaries that divided them, to discover that love, in its purest form, recognizes no borders. The end. My dear listeners, whether you're hearing this beneath a blanket of stars or with sunlight on your face, I thank you for sharing this story with us. May your night be quiet and comforting, and your days warm and full of light. May the winds carry away your worries, and may your heart be still enough to hear the truth when it speaks. Wherever your path takes you, may your steps be guided by wisdom, your burdens shared by kind hands, and your spirit strengthened by love. Until next time, stay safe, stay tender, and walk gently. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope this story brought warmth and comfort to your heart. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. From the bottom of our hearts, your support keeps us inspired to continue bringing you heartfelt stories full of love, redemption, and life-changing moments. At the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another story. Click it, and let yourself be swept away once more. You might just find another tale that moves you deeply.